Welcome, everybody. I'm thrilled to receive today this amazing professional. Today we have Joseph McGuire with us. He is a global authority in facial analysis, behavioral profiling, and high-stakes executive communication. He's the author of the book Face Facts, The Art of Reading Your Clients and Prospects for Sales, Recruitment, and Negotiation. For over 40 decades, he has been advising leaders worldwide. And today we have the honor of having this conversation about communication beyond words. So get ready to get powerful insights today. Joseph, welcome to this show.
Well, thank you, Carolina. Absolutely delighted to be invited.
My pleasure. Joseph, we've met about a year ago, I believe, at the Edwin Cohen talk show, isn't it?
That's right. Yes. We've met several times since and then had our own private conversations. So it's always a pleasure to see you.
Likewise here. And Joseph, today we have a lot of professionals, and we will have a lot of professionals listening to this conversation. We know that in corporate world, every day, we need to face many situations, right? Like job interviews, negotiations. So one question I would like to start, what is a common mistake that make people perceive them in a wrong way, even if they have good skills, good intentions?
One of the things I find, there's a quotation from Benjamin Franklin that I love. It's probably the most famous quotation associated with him. It's fail to prepare, prepare to fail. And failure, or rather preparation, incorporates many different aspects. We can prepare for the technicalities of the meeting, whether that's an interview, a negotiation, a sale, whatever. We can, the details, the technical details, financial details, all of that. That's relatively straightforward, although unfortunately still some people don't do it thoroughly. But we do also need to prepare to understand the culture of the people we're dealing with, which is often very much neglected, particularly when it's people from the West meeting people from the East or the Middle East. I've seen that time and again. We also sometimes fail to prepare ourselves internally, because when we take into account what the meeting is about, who we're meeting, both the people, whether they're decision makers or not decision makers, because that's also a factor, but their culture and what's normal for them in their culture. We have to prepare ourselves for that so that we greet them in a way that's appropriate. We don't rush into looking to make things happen, forcing things to happen, which again is a big mistake that people in some Western countries make. We also need to present with confidence, to make sure that we are perceived as calm, confident, and competent. And people often mistake confidence for competence. And that's one of the biggest mistakes we can possibly make on both sides of the table, as it were.
So can we say that confidence is a skill people can train?
Absolutely. I mean, I grew up with very little confidence. Very little confidence. I lost my confidence as a child, and I had to grow into it. And I had to jump. I had to effectively throw myself into situations where I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what the consequences were going to be, but I just had to jump. And I had to learn from making so many mistakes, some cultural, some to do with language, some to do with the fact that I didn't have the presentation skills when I started. So absolutely, we can grow into confidence. It does take practice. It does take repetition. And we do need to, I would say, practice. We can practice in front of a camera like this. We can record ourselves speaking, talking about anything, and then watch it back. How did I come across? We can practice on camera with trusted people. We can ask them to ask us direct questions, challenging questions, so that questions that we know that we're competent to answer. But we have to grow into the confidence to show up and to answer those questions confidently in front of a camera. And if we can do it in front of a camera, we can certainly do it in person.
Absolutely. It is one of the things it always impacted me in all the meetings we had before, that you and your history clearly shows how you achieve, you conquer, you really fight for many of the things that nowadays you master, right? And I found it so valuable how you are able to share these complex concepts in a very simple way and understandable. So everyone here today, me and the people that is listening, we can learn how to do this. So in your LinkedIn, it says this sentence that confidence draws people in and desperation pushes them away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, there was an interview I heard some years ago from Matthew McConaughey, and he was talking about the early stages of his career where he was not successful. And he would go to audition after audition after audition and not get the role. And he was becoming more and more dispirited. And he said he went home that day to the apartment he was living in. He was sharing it with somebody, and he started talking to them about how low he was feeling. And the person just turned around and said, yeah, desperation leaves a smell. And when we're feeling low or depressed or desperate, it transmits itself. It transmits itself in our facial expression. It transmits itself in how we speak. Even on camera like this, where you're only seeing the upper part of my body, you can still pay attention to people's breathing patterns. So there are many ways that lack of confidence transmits itself very, very quickly. Whereas if somebody's just relaxed and they can smile and they can give that full, genuine, what we call the full, genuine Duchenne smile, that transmits confidence. And particularly then when we take time, we're not in a hurry, because the most competent leaders do not rush. They do not rush to make things happen. They create time. That's so, so important in terms of transmitting confidence.
Indeed. So powerful. Being present, being in the moment.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to understand how our body will express things that maybe our mind is trying to hide, right? And how do you notice physically that someone that is under pressure is trying to hide it? What are the signs?
Okay, there's a difference obviously between being in person and online, but when we're online and we're just effectively seeing the head, there are a number of things that are very obvious. We can pay attention to people's eyes, and if the blink rate, if the eyes blink a lot very quickly like that, it tells you they're feeling stressed. That's one immediate one. And particularly if it happens during a particular part of the conversation, we know they're feeling really stressed about that topic that's under discussion right now. So that's one. We can pay attention to whether they're talking as if their jaw is very restricted. I was a therapist for many years. I practiced a number of physical therapies, and this joint here, the one that allows the jaw to move, is called the TMJ, the temporomandibular joint. It's the most powerful joint in the body, and it actually holds more pressure than a pneumatic tire, like the tire of a car. So a lot of emotional strain is held in this joint, and I pay a lot of attention to whether this joint is moving freely, and it will be reflected in people's voice, where their voice can sound almost strangled and really tight if their jaw is really tight. You'll notice other things like people chewing their lip. It tells you they're under pressure, or they're feeling anxious or uncertain about something. So there are just a few very obvious things, just in terms of the facial expressions alone. And if you see any or all of those, it tells you somebody is feeling stressed for whatever reason. It doesn't tell you why they're stressed, but it tells you they are.
So when you talk, Joseph, to established leaders, people that leave strong impression as leaders, what is something that you notice? You mentioned before they are not in a hurry. That is one important thing. But what is something else you notice and most people miss?
They listen. They spend more time listening than speaking. And when they speak, it's clear and it's decisive. It's not maybe this, maybe that, or could we possibly think about, or what if we, this is what we're doing. And if they're speaking to somebody and they want them to do something, this is what I want you to do. But this is why we're doing it. They will also give you a reason rather than do it. They're not being authoritarian about it.
Mm-hmm.
They're clarifying what they want done, why it should be done, and also by when. So you give them very clear direction, but you also demonstrate as a leader, like a really top-class leader, you're demonstrating that you care. You care about the project, but you care about the people as well. And you notice who's under pressure. And you look to see what you can do to support them. Where unfortunately, there are a lot of people in leadership roles who are not competent. And we're seeing that on a global scale, unfortunately, in politics and in business, who like to lay down the law or avoid making the necessary decisions. Delegate the hard decisions to somebody else, so somebody else is, as it were, in the firing line.
It must be very challenging. I really love how you talk about listening and care, because it seems nowadays is less frequent. Let's get here to the next question then, that is what we as professionals underestimate in meetings or these everyday interactions that we have with colleagues. They could be making an impression, leaving a perception on people, and we underestimate.
I suppose I've obviously touched on a number of key things there, and you mentioned the word complex earlier on, and we can overanalyze and make things far more complex than they need to be in terms of human interaction, in terms of communication. And so much of it is actually simple, but it does require dedication, it does require discipline, it does require practice. And listening is, I'm known obviously as a facial profiler, which is very, very much about visuals, but I'm paying more and more attention to listening. So I'm paying a lot of attention to who is listening, how they respond when somebody else has spoken, whether they've really heard not just what has been said, but what hasn't been said, what maybe has been avoided. And that's an area that I find, like, we frequently come across the term active listening. And to me, listening is active. I'm more concerned with attentive listening. And it's listening beyond the words, because words are like the coating on a cake, but they're not the cake. It's the tonality, it's the rhythm, it's the energy behind what people say that tells you whether they're really competent, whether they're really confident, whether they're really alert, and whether they're seeing just a tiny detail, or whether they're seeing it in the context of a bigger picture. And my experience is, by and large, most people miss that, because so often we're so absorbed in what's going on here, and we're too busy in our own head to actually pay attention to the world around us. In a lot of my classes and courses, I introduce I think it's called the selective attention test. You may have come across the invisible gorilla. Okay, and the invisible gorilla, it was a short study done, an exercise set up by two American psychologists, Chabris and Simons, in 1999. And what they did was they set up a basketball game, and they had two control groups. One control group had to count the number of times the team in white tops passed the ball, and the other control group had to count the number of times the team in black tops passed the ball. In the middle of the game, a guy dressed in a gorilla suit walked onto the middle of the court, beat his chest several times, and walked off again. At the end of the game, 46% of the total control group had no awareness that anybody in a gorilla suit had been near the court at all. And that exercise and variations of it has been repeated numerous times. And the term inattentional blindness was coined, because we see what we expect to see. It's all, I go back to the idea of vision. Most people think we see with our eyes, and that's partially correct. The lens is physically part of the eye, but in effect, the eye is actually a lens itself. And by the time an image reaches the visual cortex back here, it's two-dimensional, it's upside down, and there's approximately a third of the image missing. And the mind fills in the gap based on what it expects to see. So if we're not really paying attention, we're missing a lot of what's actually happening in front of us. It's why magicians can be successful. It's why confidence tricksters can be successful, because they deflect and misdirect our attention. But if we're actually paying attention, we can see, like those facial expressions I mentioned, we can see people's posture, whether somebody is sitting upright or somebody's kind of slumping and just looks like they've no energy. But we often miss it because we're just so busy here based on what we're thinking and what we expect to hear, what we expect to see.
A powerful reminder of really being in the moment. Now, what is something we can do to reset? Before talking to someone, before going into a negotiation or an interview, or just to be able to shift our mind, to change our mindset, and be able to listen and be present.
To make sure we are alert. So there are multiple ways to do it. Like, I know, for example, you've all heard of Tony Robbins, and Tony Robbins will spend time jumping up and down on a trampoline before he does any kind of presentation. And that really activates you physically and mentally. So it means if you do that, you're very present. So I'd recommend doing, if you can, do something, maybe not like a trampoline, but do some kind of, even just jump up and down for a minute. Do some kind of stretching, do some kind of even self-massage, like pound yourself on the shoulders, or throw some cold water on your face. Very, very simple, practical things to make sure you're alert. And then you can do, there's a very well-known TED talk by Professor Amy Cuddy, where she talks about posture, high power postures and low power postures. And you can practice one or more of the high power postures. The simplest one is probably the one that's like the Superman or the Superwoman pose, where you're standing with your feet apart and your hands on your hips, and you're really taking up space. And she recommends that practicing that for 2 minutes at a time. And when you stand like that, and particularly if you do it in front of a mirror, you will feel more confident. But again, it's about practice. It's about repetition. And if you're lacking in confidence generally, you need to start doing something very regularly to get your confidence up, so that you're not like again, there's another term that's used a lot called fake it till you make it. I did that before, but it doesn't really work, because you find if you do it for even a short period of time in a meeting, you'll be exhausted afterwards. And you're more concerned during the meeting as to, how am I coming across? Do I look nervous? Do they think I'm nervous? What do they think of me? And it just comes across as, no, this person isn't really together. So confidence, going back to the very beginning of the conversation, confidence is learned, or can be learned, and then we have to implement it physically, mentally, and emotionally, and verbally and non-verbally.
Well, that's a masterclass. Having it all together, having it inside of you, then is what allows you to really share it to the others. Joseph, amazing. Let me just ask you here about, what is a negotiation? Can you tell us about this? Because I know you work with high-stake leaders that need to perform in negotiations. What is a negotiation?
A negotiation, essentially, in business terms, a negotiation is the discussion to see if something can be agreed. A project, a service can be agreed on. That's essentially what it is. It's a conversation, or typically a series of conversations, to see if agreement can be reached to buy or sell a product or service, or products or services. Essentially that's it. Or it could be to do with a merger. And they're the typical things you come across for a negotiation. But the first negotiation actually starts when we get up in the morning. It's with ourselves. What will I wear today? How do I want to present myself to the world today? How do I want to be perceived today? How do I choose to present myself? So the first negotiation is with ourselves. And then when it comes to actual business, the negotiation, to have any prospect of success, again, so much of it comes down to that preparation we talked about at the very beginning. Who is going to be there? On whether you're doing it as a solopreneur or whether you're doing it as part of a team, what team members are going to be there? What's the role of each person? Making sure you practice beforehand so that it's very clear who is going to speak about what topic, how they're going to speak. If you're negotiating with another team, who are they? You have to research their roles. You have to research, at least as far as you can, about their personalities, so that you know what's likely to motivate not just the company, but the individuals. And you may decide or not to press some of their buttons during the negotiation, depending on the nature of the negotiation. I've been involved in that as well, and that can be part of the strategy. I know this is expanding on the original question, but I'm coming from experience as well. So a negotiation typically is a series of conversations which involve thorough preparation or require thorough preparation. So you're not just, again, I'm just repeating myself here, but you're not just thinking about the technicalities of the potential deal. You're thinking about the people involved. You're thinking about the consequences. You're thinking of what are referred to as the BATNA and the WATNA. BATNA means the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So what's the best possibility that best alternative possibility that could arise? Because there's what appears to be on the table may not really be what's on the table. There may be something more or there may be something less. And what's the worst alternative to a negotiated agreement? If it doesn't work, are you absolutely dependent on it working? If you are, you're in a very weak position. Or can you see alternatives? So a negotiation is, like I said, typically a series of conversations for which you're well prepared, but you have to see a bigger picture beyond what appears to be the case at the outset. Probably a very long-winded answer to your question, but
that's exactly what we needed, because that answers so many other questions that I had for you. But it's interesting, Joseph, because negotiation, as you said, the moment we wake up, we start negotiating. And the moment we talk to our friends, husband, wife, in a job, or maybe buying something, so many times we are using these skills. And I love how you point out that preparation is key in this process. Now, we know that as humans, we judge very quickly, even before someone opens the mouth, right, and says something. But what are some things you recommend for professionals in negotiations, in interviews, or going through these events, for them to avoid, for them to try not to repeat a pattern, not to repeat in these scenarios?
Yeah. Making assumptions is one of the worst things we can do. We register, when we see a face, whether it's on screen like this or whether it's in person, we register faces in something like 1/17th of a second. So before we've had time to think, we've registered the face and we've told ourselves a story about the person. We have created a story. We've created a history, a back history of who they are, where they've come from, what they're about, whether we like them, whether we don't like them. They remind us of somebody we really like or somebody we really dislike. And so we've already created this mirage about who they actually are, which can get in the way of actually engaging in successful conversation or negotiation with them. And positive or negative bias can be equally damaging, because if we are overly positively biased, we can miss very important signals. But if we're negatively biased, we can be very dismissive of very positive signals. And that I've seen that time and again in interviews and negotiations. So as far as possible, get assumptions out of the way and just look to meet the person. Again, the preparation bit is so important, that we have at least a reasonable awareness of who they are, why the meeting is happening, why we're meeting this particular person or this particular group of people first, what's their culture, and what's normal. Like people, I do give roundabout answers, but that's the way my mind works, because I see all sorts of interrelated connections. But for example, I'm talking a lot with people in the Middle East at the moment. And one thing, if you're meeting people in the Middle East for a negotiation, a potential sale, anything like that, when you go into the room, you wait to be invited to sit down. In the West, we would normally just, okay, there's a chair there, this is our side of the table, we'll go and sit down. But in the Middle East, it's culturally appropriate to wait until you're invited to sit down. If you, in the West, somebody gives you a business card, typically you take a look at it and then you'll put it in your pocket. If you're meeting somebody in China or Japan, firstly, the card is presented two hands like that. You receive their card with two hands, and then you look at it. You say, wow. And you express appreciation. You express admiration. You comment positively on the card. And then when you've done that, you put the card down directly in front of you. And every so often you look at it again and maybe make another appreciative noise. But if you just take the card and put it in your pocket, done. You've insulted them. And the conversation may continue, but the deal is just not going to happen. So cultural awareness is so important. And it's very easy to assume, as we so often do as humans, that because we behave in a particular way, we see the world in a particular way, others see it likewise. And it's one of the biggest mistakes we can make. So that's an essential part of the research if we want to be successful.
That's so important. And it doesn't mean we have to stop being who we are or forgetting our culture, but it's a matter of being flexible in this moment, right?
Yeah. Being willing to adapt. Yeah.
The more we talk with other people, and especially from different backgrounds, the more we learn about our world, ourselves.
Yeah, it's a wonderful way to learn. It's a wonderful way to grow.
Indeed. Joseph, we talk about actionable and powerful insights today for professionals that want to improve their communication, their confidence. Is there anything else that you want to share with us? Maybe where we can find your work or anything that you're working on right now?
Yeah, I'm working on a variety of different things, but just to go back to the whole thing of leadership and respect and communication. I came across a lovely story about Michael Caine, the English film star. He's a much older man now, but he's been in movies for a long time, hugely successful. But I came across a lovely story about him recently, where he was going in for, I think it was just a 15-minute recording of something, and the people in the studio thought he would arrive with his entourage and people to help him and support him, but he came in by himself, and he came in a little bit early, and he made a point of going around to everybody in the studio, the technicians, everybody who was there. He went over and said hello to them and asked their name. And afterwards, after the recording was done, he made a point of going over to everybody again and thanking them before he left. And while he's not in a he's not in a formal leadership position, that quality of respect leaves a legacy. People remember you for that you demonstrated caring, you demonstrated respect. Sir Alex Ferguson, who was the legendary Manchester United manager for many years, for those who were interested in soccer, he always knew the names of the cleaning ladies, the people who took care of the kid, the people in the canteen. He knew who their families were. He knew when they had birthdays. If there was somebody, if they had a child or a family member who was sick, he knew about it. And he made a point of paying attention to that. So paying attention to the people around us is very, very important, because it's part of our shared humanity, but also it's when we're meeting somebody, no matter who it is, no matter whether it's the first time or the 100th time, it's the first impression and the last impression that count. A lot of what happens in the middle, we forget about. But we remember how we felt when we met them, and we remember how we felt after leaving them. So paying attention to apparently what appear to be maybe less important things is actually vitally important. And ultimately, so much of what happens in business, as in life, comes down to relationships and the quality of relationships we build. And it still comes back to listening. Are we listening? So that's not about the projects I'm working on. I am currently writing another book, which is very much about women who are in relationship or dating men, because I've had so many female friends over the years who've been, shall we say, disappointed or very badly treated by men. And to me, men are by and large simple creatures, easy to read. So I can help women read the green flags and the red flags and give them strategies to uncover the real character and the real motivation of the guy, so that they're not caught in those kind of unpleasant circumstances. And then I'm also working on some other totally different projects, which are much more specifically related to business, because I love variety.
You're always surprising me. And I will leave under this video for all of you attending this session today and watching this video later, all this information from Joseph, his amazing work, and so important, especially in the times we live nowadays. Joseph, a beautiful reminder now at the end that you gave us, that we work with people. At the end of the day, we're human beings interacting with each other. So important to remember this. Thank you for your time, for your presence today. As I said before, every time I listen to you, so many insights, so many wonderful things that we can apply. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'll see you around. Thanks, Milena, for being here, and all of you for attending this session.
Thank you, Carolina.